Trustees meeting, December 17th, 2012. The record shows the meeting is starting at 6:03 p.m. First is welcome and public comment. Any public comment?
First, I'm filming.
Thank you.
Second,
thank you.
Same comment as before. This meeting wasn't properly posted. If you have any anything that indicates that it was, I'd be interested in seeing it.
We'll be happy to send something. Sure. Thank you.
So, actually, James, I'd like to take a step back for a second, and given that given what happened last week in Connecticut on Friday, I'd like to take a moment of silence out of respect for the people who were victims there and for the families that are currently dealing with that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. That's a very appropriate. Okay. The agenda. Item number 2 is a review of the agenda, which I'll do right now. Item number 3 will be review and approval of minutes. Item 4 will be review and discussion of the proposed lease proposal. Item 5 will be review and discussion of the revised budget proposal. 6 is a review and discussion of the Chester's recommendation for revocation of the Foster Community School Charter in preparation for the meeting of the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education, the BESE, on December 18th. And item number 7 will be discussion of the agenda for the next meeting, and we'll adjourn. So, review and approval of the minutes. Thank you again, Eric Woodbury, for being so diligent about being here. And
is there public speaking time?
the board, we had just passed that. Amy, the board will recognize you because you were so very soon to that. I'd be happy to let the board recognize any master.
I'll be very short. I know you guys are really busy dealing with this. I just want to say, I just talked to some parents of older kids, and I can't really speak for them, but they all agree with me. If it was up to us, we'd love to see you guys fight. We'd love to see you fight for the school. The main reason is the enrollment issue. We feel that because of the numbers, we know the numbers are really low, and I think it's around 115, 113. Like you said, 110 is the dead zone. I'm guessing, pretty much guaranteed, another 3 or 4 kids are going to pull their kids out before then. If that's the case, we would just, because we fought so hard for the past 3 years, we just think it's a shame just to hand the school over tomorrow to them and then end up closing anyway because of numbers. So I just wanted to say on behalf of some older parents who weren't here tonight that we would love to see you guys go down fighting. That's all I wanted to say. Because we would love to go down fighting. And we think it's horrific what they're doing to you guys and us. Okay? And if the numbers, I'll leave after this, but if the numbers are so low that it's pretty much based on that, the enrollment issue, if we're looking at 3 or 4 people leaving and then financially it can't sustain itself, and so it's irrelevant what we do tomorrow, go in there and just kick some you-know-what, and don't let them just take this away from us. Because we fought so hard for this place. We should just hand it to them on a silver platter. That's all I wanted to say. So I know you'll make your decision, but I just wanted to say that, if it's a numbers game and the numbers don't look good, don't let them just take it away from us and then be on us to close the doors, not them. Let them do the dirty work, not us. Okay, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks for coming to speak.
And this is not just a couple parents, by the way. It's at least 12.
Thank you, Amy.
Okay? It's a bunch of parents. Thank you.
back to item number 3, the review and approval of the minutes. Again, Eric, thank you for putting the minutes together. There's a pretty good number of items on this. I hope everyone had a chance to read this. It was a very informative meeting because so much was covered, but rather than go through it, just ask, did anyone have any questions, corrections, or any other comments about the minutes?
So I move to accept the minutes of the board meeting of December 5th.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All in favor? All 8 votes in favor. Let's see, item number 4 is a review and discussion of the revised lease proposal. In the Finance Committee, we discussed the work that had been done. We've been very fortunate to have a very supportive landlord who's built us this incredible space and has tried to make it as economically feasible as possible for us to stay here and continue our work for 5 years. I think it also agreed to make a significant cash contribution. And also, given the surprise in our enrollment this year, to take a 6-month cut, not a deferral and reduction, but an actual cut in rent. When the revocation came up, he made his gift conditional, so it was a contingent gift, and did not count towards our budget. And but he did go one step further and offer to make the remaining 2 years of the term at a much lower rate. We just reviewed the lease at the Finance Committee meeting and went over the terms, which were, as you said earlier, 6 months and no rent, January through June, starting July 2013 through June 2015, the rent $23,000, significant reduction. There was a clause in the lease that allowed Nick to do a little better than cover his costs, provided we were surpassed our break-even cash flow about 10%, and would make an agreement to reimburse him something back. So that way the school was doing very, very well in terms of enrollment and income. Nick would be able to at least to recoup part of what was his original, the spirit of the deal that we hoped to have. Obviously, you don't go into just hoping to cover your costs. You hope to make something out of it. The Finance Committee discussed the fact that the lease is moot in many respects, but we want to go ahead and do it anyway because it helps prove out the cash flow for this year on a 6-month forgiveness. So that being the case, I guess the Finance Committee would recommend that the board approve signing the lease of the board. Because it is a reduction, as we pointed out earlier, this doesn't run afoul of any procurement issues because it is A, an existing lease, and B, we renegotiated for a lesser amount of money, which are the 2 exceptions in procurement for the bidding issues all there. So I see Aaron nodding his head, which means I'm somewhat correct. Thank you. Anyway, so you'll hear a motion to approve, please. As amended.
I'll make a motion that we approve the lease as amended.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Any questions?
No questions.
There might be some questions. Not everybody was at the Finance Committee meeting.
Through the chair, just I think we ought to recognize Ms. Lopata's constant effort to help the school. This is obviously a significant sacrifice on his part. Obviously, this is in part a business, and basically he's eliminating any further rent payments for the rest of this year and reducing the rent significantly over the next 2 years to be sure that the school can deliver the program intended. And I think that we ought to recognize as a board that Ms. Lopata has been far more than just a landlord and a businessman. he's really been an enormous ally and support to the school, and I'd like that noted.
Thank you, Tony. That will be duly noted. And it's very, very well said. It's been a pleasure working with him. He's from Gloucester. He's always wanted something like this in this area. He's been very, very, he's an avid hockey player. He's a family man who enjoys the rink time, and he grew up here doing the same. And he's always had a what's good for the community is good for mixed business kind of mentality, and it's been wonderful working with him. And I must say that we probably talk, every day with everything that's happened in the last 2 or 3 weeks, and he's always had a very, very strong feeling about the potential for the school, and that's why he's always fearlessly backed it. He's never once doubted the promise that this place could have. So, Tony, thank you for saying that. Nick definitely deserves our praise and our gratitude for all he's done. Thank you, Tony. Item number 5, review and discussion of revised budget proposal. Finance Committee also reviewed a new finance budget proposal that was put together by Cindy Marie. And this was included the lease terms. It included an estimate of 110 as an estimate for enrollment. I think at one point we had budgets with students in places as high as 125 based on the children that came in. We had such a swing in such a short period of time. It was very, very hard for the finance committee to really sit down and create a budget. And this is one reason why we're just getting around to this now. We put a lot of stock in the November campaign to bring people in. We had just brought 5 people in, I think, in October, so we were feeling somewhat confident that with the extra effort, we would be able to draw more people in. We had 2 open houses that were very well attended, and I want to thank all the board members, Dave, Art, who made over 150 phone calls in a 2-week period to bring families in. I want to thank the families themselves who came in because they were terrific events. There was amazing things going on in every room. There were art projects, there was music, there was just an incredible feeling of the vibrancy and the energy of the stimulation and the inspiration of this place in every single room. It was quite an experience. We did have some very good fortune to get 10 people interested in next year, and under the program with more kindergarten enrollments, I think we would have had a very, very good year next year. But now what we're looking at is a budget based on what we have, and we did a budget that balances for 110. There will have to be some concessions made, and this is something that we talked about with the parents recently, and we'll be reviewing with parents and the faculty where the appropriate places are to make those concessions. This will be a very bilateral experience, which I think is quite in keeping with the school's culture. So we have a budget. The Finance Committee is recommending that the board approves the budget. Any question, Art?
Yeah. What kind of concessions would have to be made with this budget of 110 students, specifically?
Well, specifically, we have some, what I would say, we have some administrative areas where we can do reduced hours or reduced pay. We have some
reduced hours of what?
Or reduced pay, however you want to look at it. It's like a flex time kind of thing. I mean, there are ways to do this at certain levels, where we have certain areas where we're not statutorily required to have certain positions. We also have certain areas where we can address block scheduling. Again, I'm not the educator, so this is hard for me to speak of, and also in respect for the fact that this is an ongoing process, I'd like to just say that this is something that we still have to work on. We know how much has to be taken out. We've got several different ways we can do that. We just decided it's best for the school right now, Ira. So we don't have that specificity that you're looking for right at this moment.
When do we have to make a decision on?
Oh, well, we want to make it, we've already talked about this at the parents' meeting, that we have an opportunity, Cindy Marie will come up and talk about it before Christmas or after Christmas, and we can decide.
I'm just very concerned about the about the children that are in this school.
Of course, everyone is. I mean, there's no one is, you're completely in the company with that. What we are, we are very focused on keeping the program intact with the teachers. We have we are, as it's proposed right now, the classroom student-facing teacher is unaffected at this level. But I cannot promise it, because I said earlier, budgets change all the time.
So what would happen if in February 1st there'd be 100 students?
Well, at that point, I don't know whether, Ira, if it's a decision that has to be made at what level of staffing. Is the school still viable and true to the charter?
So, Ira, I think from my perspective on the finance committee, I just voted for this, but I see it as a sort of a last holdout kind of budget that it's contingent on some other discussion that we're going to have tonight about other issues about where we go with the charter. So I think I see it as a necessary step that we need to submit a budget to the department that shows that we have a balanced budget under the current circumstances, or under those that we are likely to see pretty soon. And it's basically an outline of what sort of cuts we would make, but I think those cuts would have to be a point of discussion as to where those would happen if we were to move forward with that budget. But I also think that there needs to be discussion tonight about whether we are moving ahead with that budget, in fact. So this is a kind of procedural thing that I think we need to do, but I think the real discussion is about what's going to be our position and our next steps ahead about the charter.
So we should vote the budget first, is that what you're saying? Or discuss this?
Yeah, I think it's great that you're asking questions like that. I think, some of the questions, we should ask those questions, because it's, of course, good to have that. But I do think that this isn't really the crux of the issue. The crux of the issue tonight is about what are we going to do next relative to the meeting tomorrow on the Board of Education.
Well, then, that's what I'd like to talk about, my feelings on that. I'd like to say that what I don't want to happen here is to have these kids.
Could I interrupt for 1 second? I think there's a point of order here. We were on 5, and I think what you're going to start talking about, Ira, is more germane to item 6. Am I wrong in that?
I don't know. Art's point is we're discussing the proposed budget, and then Dave talked about, there was a discussion about what our next step is going forward, which sort of relates to the recommendation for revocation. So, excuse me, Ira, when you said you want to talk about your feelings, you're talking about your feelings for revised budget?
About the budget and the future of the budget and the future of the kids affected by the budget.
Right.
That's what I want to talk about.
I think that's a good discussion.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what I want to say is, if we have this budget approved today, and then 2 weeks from now we have 10 less kids or 20 less kids, and we have to start removing support here, teachers, support staff, everything, this is not going to be a viable educational institution. And it's going to drive away kids. And it's going to drive away more kids and teachers. And eventually it'll have to close because it won't be a viable situation. So my point is, if we consider termination, instead of getting involved in a budget that's basically temporary, and let these kids move on to what they have to do. I know the parents don't want to, But for the kids' sake, to get into an educational opportunity that finishes a whole half a year, rather than have something happen in March, or February, or April, when they're left nowhere to go. I'm very concerned about what's going to happen here. And teachers. I mean, if I was a teacher, I'd be, I wouldn't wait till June. I'd be looking prior to June for either new employment in education, if the opportunity arises, or out of education. And, I feel compelled to leave. And that's going to leave us, because we're not going to be able to hire new people, I would imagine. And if you don't have various support staff, office staff, support staff, substitutes, it's not fair to the kids. And I'm trying to place myself as an advocate to the kids. If they're going back to Gloucester Public Schools, or they don't want to, or they want to go here, or they want to go there, they can get a start on that and finish a good year. I'm afraid it's not going to go all the way to June. And that would be just, in April or February, So that's my concern. And I'd like to talk about it. I'd like to see what other people think. I'm not the only person that feels this way. I think some parents are, I've talked to some parents, and they'd love to go to June, and they want to fight, and they don't want to give it up, and they want to, show these people that, but they also say, what if something caves in February? What do we do then?
So again, I suggest that I have the same concerns you do. I think everybody on the board does. Again, I think this budget is a procedural thing we have to do, that we need to present to the department. The next item on the agenda is a discussion about where we're going to go. So are we going to close the school on end of December? Are we going to try to stay the course through the end of June? What's it going to be? That's the next item.
After the budget.
That's the bigger topic. I think this budget, as I see it, is if we plan to move forward with keeping the school open January through June, this is the budget that we would put forward that would be the basis for operating the school.
And do we have 115 kids today?
We had 119, as I understand it, there may have been a drop. So enrollment is dropping.
So we'd have to ask Nikki on that. I want to go back to Dave's point about the procedural issue. Because of the way that we've, started low and then went up 5 and then came down, it's been very hard, and I'm repeating myself here, but to actually come up with a budget. We have to have a budget. We have to have a budget submitted. That's why we're doing this. We have to go on record as having a board-approved budget. Okay? And we have to be realistic. Can't be pie in the sky. So what we've done is we put this together. So this is what we have. And as I said, it's a procedural thing. All your points are very well taken. At the parent meeting that just happened, Tony made a very, very simple speech and saying that, here's a situation where, we really need everyone, because the teachers have been committed to teaching your kids, and we need the parents to be committed to staying in the school. Because there are always going to be reasons why people leave schools. Something bad happens at home and someone has to move away, someone loses a job, there's a domestic issue, there's an intervention. There's always a reason why kids are going to leave schools. What we'd like to do is minimize the fear factor of their not having a school to go to, or having to choose someplace else. So with that in mind, we had a very constructive parents meeting, and we got right into that issue about, how much can we deal with cuts and still have a program that's effective. We had one very, very interesting parent who said, she'd been through situations where things had gone through changes before, and she found that, it's what makes the educational process strong. No question the teacher's important, but also the family participation is very important, and it's clearly here. So there are a lot of different parts to this question about the culture of the school and how to keep it a great place. And it's not for me to discuss this right now, but I just want to say that we are actively involving the parents, because your point is very well taken that we want the parents to feel that this is still serving up what they need. And when it doesn't, you know, we will cross that bridge when we come to it. Right now, this budget gives us that kind of room to do, you know, what we want to do for the kids. Anyway, so. Okay. Any more discussion on the budget?
Again, I'd like to put it on record that, you know, I think there needs to be further discussion about where those cuts will actually be, that this is one model of where those cuts would happen. And I think it's important that we have a discussion with the staff, especially the staff who will be impacted by this, before it's a final thing. But obviously, we're under pressure to submit a budget, and we have to create a model within which we have to operate, and we'll have those discussions and make those further decisions about where those cuts will actually take place.
Any other comments? Questions about the budget?
So we had a motion and a second, I believe, and discussion.
Put to a vote. All in favor? Okay. Item number 6, review and discussion of Commissioner Chester's recommendation for revocation of the Gloucester Community Charter School Charter in preparation for the meeting of the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education December 18th. The Board will review and discuss feedback from the meetings of the Charter School Office. The Board will discuss GCA's case against revocation and preparations for the meeting of the ESE on Tuesday, December 18th. Well, let me start off by just discussing a little bit about the background and the meetings that we've been having. When Commissioner Chester decided that he was going to put revocation on the table at the last EESE board meeting, we had a brief discussion with Jeff Wolfson, who was the then departing pro-term head of the charter school office, who said that we'd be in touch. And so they did call. Cliff Schwan called the following week. We set up an appointment for, this was a week later on Tuesday. At that point, the purpose of the meeting was to go in and discuss what the charter school office wanted to discuss, which was to say, well, we don't want to say we can predict anything, but with a revocation on the table from the board, you know, let's go through what the procedure is. They talked about the board meeting, they talked about the revocation, the intent to revoke vote, the 2-week period in which you had time you had a chance to call for a hearing, which means you're appealing the revocation. And then the time that it would take to actually get the revocation effective based on how long the hearing lasts, the outcome of the hearing. They also were interested in some feedback about, you know, we had some comments about how we felt that we weren't properly portrayed in the site visit and some other issues that we had. One of my goals with the meeting was to get a second meeting so that we could address these in greater detail. Cliff, who is now the new head of the charter school office, I think as of like a week after Thanksgiving or something, was agreed to that. And so I set the meeting for the following Tuesday, and at the same time, we got a call from the auditors about you know, our budget and all those things, and how we should talk and make sure we bring that up very clearly with Cliff, which we did. And so Cliff is you know, talking to us about the budget. They were working with very old numbers, and again, that's all they would have because we hadn't approved the budget like that year. They were not working with the benefit of some of the help that Vic has offered to give us. And when we came made the case, it was a totally different picture. Although these items were not proven, they were supported documents because we didn't have votes on them and such. The conversation then at the end of the first meeting was Cliff saying, well, you really have to show me how you're going to get through all this. And so we had a third meeting with the CSO office. And that was could be when Cindy Marie came along. And Beth also attended part of that meeting. There were about 3 parts to that meeting. We actually had our attorney Colin talking about all the different options that were available to us. There is the option of being revoked and then appealing the revocation. There's the option of surrendering the charter, and there's the option of a emergency dissolution of the charter. And those cases are usually based on very, very bad financial insolvency. I think we've shown with the numbers that that's not our case, but in the meantime, between those 2 meetings coming up, we also had some bad news from our bank line of credit where they are now pushing back because of the revocation. The charter school office is aware of this, the auditor is aware of this. This is something that we disclosed right over the bank. They were the first ones we called when this news came up. So I think we acted very well in terms of disclosing what was going on. The bargaining position that we now realize from some of these discussions we've been having is that for us to keep the school open, we may have to, we do have to negotiate away our right to a hearing. And the idea that if the state will work with us if we have make an agreement as a board not to appeal the revocation. They don't want a big protracted fight. They would rather have us just work with them. They are very much interested in having the school stay open through the end of the year. But they are very clearly setting their stick in the ground and saying, if you fight this appeal, we won't help you. And right now, with the bank line of credit being where it is, we need cash flow help. We need a large amount of money to get through payrolls every month. And we need to give us to a time so we are current on those liabilities. So the position we're in now is we have just received, literally 20 minutes before coming over to this meeting, I received a memo from Cliff when I asked him what we could do in order to keep the school open through the end of the year. And Cliff Chung wrote me back, and you all have the letters right here. And I'll just read it to everybody now. So, dear Mr. Caviston, I'm in receipt of your email message sent very early this morning to indicate the willingness of the GCA to enter an agreement with the department to work collaboratively to keep the GCS open through the end of the current school year, if that is in the best interest of the children and families currently attending the school. You indicate that in order for GCAS to maintain its core academic program and remain financially viable, there's significant cuts to staffing and an assumed enrollment of 110 students from January to June 2013. The school estimates it means a December 31st, 2012 payment of $200,000 with monthly payments for the remainder of the year. That was pretty much what I was telling you we needed to keep going through the year. And the key deliverable that he's looking for here is if the GCS Board of Trustees votes to surrender its charter, forfeiting its rights to an administrative appeal prior to the scheduled revocation at the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education's December 18, 2012 meeting, the department can work cooperatively with the school to arrange for payments to be made in a manner consistent with that described above. If we can mutually determine that continuation of the school for the remainder of the year is in the best interest of the children and families of the school. I include this strong caveat because even assuming a modified payment schedule, significant cuts to the staffing levels and lower student enrollment level of 110, any changes to these or other factors could quickly threaten the viability of the school as a going concern. Because changes to the payment schedule requires a waiver of regulations, a waiver requests must be acted on by the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education. Please keep us apprised of the actions the school and its board choose to take as soon as possible. I will be on standby checking email throughout the evening. So this is the situation we're in, where we are being asked to make a decision sometime between now and tomorrow morning at 8:30 a.m. It's a very difficult choice because it's almost like if we don't accept this, then we don't get the financial help we need, then we're in trouble. If we do accept it, we will get the financial help we need, but then it's a question of how long we stay in our trouble, which is your point. And I think we all understand that this is not a good position to be in.
No.
But there's they hold all the cards, and I know there's some concern about whether the language here offers us much protection, and I would say no, it doesn't offer us much protection. There's still, I would say, reserving the right to cancel, but they're the strong caveat, assuming a modified payment schedule, significant cuts to staffing. And we're not talking about significant cuts to staffing. I just want to put that out there right now. The lower student enrollment, yes, we set a very low bogey, hoping that they find that, to get some comfort in that. And other factors could quickly threaten the viability of the school is a growing concern. So we've got to have a discussion about what we want to do. Because, as I've been telling people before this came up, that I feel that we are with two really terrible choices. A reduced program, which can have kind of a snowballing effect or whatever, or 110 or 115 kids released in a very short period of time, because we definitely are over on the money issue. We need this $200,000 as soon as possible. And the state now is going to be the only one that pays it. We're not going to get a line of credit payment from the bank unless the state authorizes them to. If we appeal, the state has told us in no uncertain terms that they're not going to authorize the bank to release the money. And besides that, the bank is probably out of the picture now at this point anyway. So there's where we are. There's no good path here, but we do have to do something. And I'm just throwing this out to the board, and I think, does everyone understand this? Does anyone have any questions? Just to see what our issues are here.
James, I just want to add a couple things here. I think for people who may not be as familiar with the background of all of this, and that's not the board, but for anybody else who may not be involved in it so directly, they might well wonder how this happened. We were apparently a very viable school in September, and now we're in December, and we're talking about whether we're going to surrender our charter or whether it's going to be revoked. A dramatic turn of events. I think the issue has been that there's been a significant drop in actual enrollment since pre-enrollment back in March, and that we've had a gap in our budget since September. We took some action on that when Tony stepped aside and removed the executive director's salary as part of the budget. There continued to be a gap, and as you were pointing out, if you roll back the film a few months, we were in a place where we were starting to enroll some new kids back in late September and October. And the decision was whether we were going to make cuts in the program and perhaps sacrifice any potential new enrollees, or move ahead with an aggressive enrollment campaign and try to build that enrollment further. So we made a very conscious decision, as many businesses do, to move ahead with the full program and have a gap in our budget for the period from October through early November. We did see some very good results from the enrollment campaign, and you alluded to some of the activities that were done as part of that. That included not only board members here, but staff, particularly Shay and Tanya, but also a number of parents as well. And we actually had quite a good showing from that. we had, may not sound like a lot, but it was 10 families, new families. 10 new families looking at a school in the middle of November is a significant number. You usually start to see more people interested in January and February. Their excitement about the school was quite apparent. They wanted to send their kids here this next year. Unfortunately, that was the story. They were looking for next year, not this year. So that didn't address our budget gap. So we went back to the spreadsheets, went back to the budget, reviewed it all, and wound up meeting with Mick, as James referred to, and had a really very substantial and very generous agreement arranged through that discussion about maintaining the budget, maintaining the full program through the rest of the year, with the idea that we would continue our enrollment efforts. And as you may remember, there's been discussion about a marketing plan that's been quite well mapped out already to further promote the school and move ahead into the next year, and assume we're going to build the enrollment from this point forward. Within 3 days, less than 3 days of making that agreement, and before any finance committee meeting or any board meetings occurred for our board, to formalize that agreement, the commissioner made a statement at the Board of Education meeting stating that he was considering revocation. Of course, that has immediately impacted our enrollment. We've seen a decline ever since then. We have also seen, of course, any agreements with Mick at this point in terms of forgiveness on rent and so forth have also been eroded because of the likelihood of whether we're going to survive through the end of the school year and into next. So that's helped create the situation, and I think the data, apparently the budget information that the department's been operating on was based on data and budgetary information early in the year, rather than the updated version that we had put together that would bridge the gap and that would have addressed the situation. So here we are faced with the decision and the choices that you just outlined.
Through the chair, I just wanted to I couldn't agree more with Dave, and want to say how much I appreciate him walking through that history, because I think it's really important, particularly noting the impact of a system that actually causes a school that may be in difficulty to end up in greater difficulty. So the actual choice to indicate an intent to revoke at the time the commissioner did resulted in a significant hit to enrollment at exactly the time you can't afford to have it. This is not the first time that this has happened. In fact, before the school even opened, we had offered up 2 possible sites when there was a slowdown in the modulars being completed. Again, I want to point out, just because I think it's important, and there'll be other times to really put the history out there, but in fact that slowdown was anticipated by the board, which is something that is being indicated, the opposite is being indicated in the commissioner's notes repeatedly, failure on the part of the board to anticipate construction delays. In fact, that was not the case. We have full documentation indicating that back in late May and June prior to opening, we were exploring off-site places to open. We had worked with the Manchester Athletic Club. We put all this information together, and at the indication from the department, who we checked in on this, they indicated that it would be more difficult for them to approve a out-of-district temporary site for opening. We then stuck to the modulars. We worked with them. As you all know the history, the building inspector used that process to slow us down again. And so that it was, we had when it was discovered that there was 1 trailer with Connecticut stickers on it, not something that the board could anticipate going out and looking at stickers on trailers. But when that came up, the one issue was to change the plumbing so it met Mass State standards. We did that, and in fact, I met with the state inspector and the state engineer and the owner's engineer on site, and we agreed, and I asked specifically to them, is the only requirement that we're changing out this plumbing in this one trailer and a stop work order which had stopped all construction of the modulars to slow the process down would be lifted? They all agreed at that meeting that that was the case. So the state inspector said, I'll expedite it, I'll have it done and back to you by Friday, which he did. Then it was over to the building inspector in Gloucester. We hear nothing Monday. We hear nothing Tuesday. Wednesday, 3 days after he said he would be able to expedite it and get it back, we get back a 3-page list of changes to be made to the modulars. The central one being that in fact, he indicated that our modulars, which were temporary because they were not attached to an existing school building, would have to meet the requirements of a freestanding school to be used indefinitely. And so since there was not a roof over, we could either put a roof over all 4 trailers to create one building, and then we could only have one staff bathroom available. Or if we didn't want to put a roof over all of them, then we had to put an independent staff bathroom in every single modular, gutting the interior of every single trailer in order to have, for what would be 5 classrooms, 5 teachers, 4 staff bathrooms. So it was this kind of thing that delayed the process. And so on that basis, the commissioner declared the school not viable, having indicated that we could not use Windover, we could not use Cumming Center. Cumming Center had 3 different educational facilities in there already in operation. Neither one would be approved. He questioned whether Windover would meet the certification standards as a school, and the building inspector for Rockport and the fire chief, on the phone and in a letter in my presence, indicated to the commissioner that Windover had been fully certified as an educational facility for any purpose in the town of Rockport for 40 years. Commissioner denied both sites, said you open on time in the modulars or the charter will go beyond the opening period and it will be revoked essentially, it will not exist. So 3 crews overnight, to get the school open on time, we open up 24 hours in advance, but he declares, at this point, knowing it looks like we're going to open, that the school's no longer viable and the kids should go back to their schools. Our enrollment gets cut by 30%, meaning our tuition and income is cut by 30%, nearly $250,000 that would have gone into teachers, into curriculum, into delivery of the educational program, and resulted in a larger student body, which then would have solidified the school as a viable institution for the long term, was denied. And so this is not a pattern that's unknown. In fact, Banneker School, which was renewed twice already, failed to meet AYP for several years in a row, in fact, the entire way through its first 5-year period, in both ELA and math, and yet it was renewed. And when they were renewed with extremely low results in math for years, they developed a school-wide program, which was documented in the Association of Curriculum and Development published article. And what they actually said was the greatest hit to the school was a policy that sanctions schools formally. And they lost over 50 children. Just like we had hit in our enrollment, only much larger. But because they were a larger school, they were able to survive. But this kind of process, regardless of what gets decided here tonight by this board, there are serious issues with a system which knows, where the educational leaders have indicated that when you sanction a school in this way, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, potentially, that you could have damaged. Banneker, by the way, just so everyone knows, is now a blue ribbon poster child for the charter movement in terms of a school that turns around. But it took them nearly 2 charter periods to do that.
I'd like Yes, Jay.
Thanks, Tony. Thank you. It's good to have the context and the history. I'm just trying to, as all of us are, trying to think about what the options are. It sounds like the commissioner and the state people have us over a barrel. It sounds like if as many of the parents and indeed probably some of the board would like to fight this, they will arrange that our funding disappears this spring. So it sounds to me as though IRA was beginning the conversation that we need to have, which is what is the best course of action for us to take for the kids, for the families, and for the teachers and administrators in the school. We can discuss that, but I'm hoping that there might also be some reports from the parent meeting and from, I mean, you know, I'm not sure what would be the advice of the teachers in the school about what we should do. What is Beth thinking? You know, we've heard of some parents, but I don't know about other parents. And even parents, I think, who want to want us to fight this tomorrow morning and stand up, as the school so often has in the past. Even those parents, you know, if it's clear that the school is doomed, may not feel so feisty in the spring and would be, you know, well within their rights to start thinking of options for their children once the school is no longer an option. It's one thing to fight for a school and to stand up for your children, as parents in this school have done over and over and over again. That's one thing. But if the school has been forced to sign off on its existence as a condition of even continuing to exist in January and February, then I think even the bravest, feistiest parent would be within her rights to start looking elsewhere. So I think Ira has pointed us to the hard, agonizing question, which is, would it be better to close the school out soon, or is there enough support among the parents, teachers, and the administrators and the families to make some good go of this spring and go out in style in a school that is much loved by many people? I don't know the answer to it, but Ira's right that if we're bleeding from 1,000 cuts, you know, if we're losing a teacher every other week, if, you know, we're not making up for staff departures, and if people are, you know, if the thing just is slipping away like a sandcastle, you know, when the tide comes in, that's not viable. So I don't know how to think about basically our two options. I mean, I really don't. I would really love to get some advice from the community of this school about what people want to do. We have to say something tonight. We have to decide something tonight because of the meeting tomorrow morning. But it seems to me, I've gone on too long, but it seems to me totally we have a revolver to our temple from the state in terms of the finances. I don't see any viable way of doing what I have done and others have done, which is picketing, you know, calling up the TV people, you know, doing what all of us have done for this school and indeed for other causes, all our lives. But I don't see that that's going to get us anywhere financially. I mean, I don't see where it's going to make us a viable school. And so I'm just torn between agreeing with Ira when he's saying, the thing could just slide away and be kind of a bad show. We could end badly when we have been such a good place, or whether there's the sufficient will and, heart in this community to pull through and make the spring a worthy spring for the kids. I don't know.
Thank you, Jay. All right, go ahead.
I want to pick up on something that Dave said. I think you mentioned revocation and voluntary surrender. It seems to me that on the heels of what Jay just said, revocation is a given. That is going to happen. That's a fait accompli. It's just finished. So if we choose not to surrender the charter still will be revoked. And we won't get the money. If we surrender the charter is still going to be revoked, but we get money so that people can be paid in December. So the difficulty for me is trying to figure out what is the best course of action for the benefit of the whole, meaning we're here for the children. The parents aren't coming to school every day, the kids are. What is the best course of action to allow these kids to get the best education they can without instability and without, using a medical metaphor, if the IV is hooked up for a transfusion and somebody walks by and knocks it out, somebody will bleed to death.
Well, I think I think that the department's indication that if we can, I think the language of, if we can mutually agree that the school is, that keeping the school going is in the best interests of the students, I think that's legitimate. I think that that's, what they're simply recognizing is that there's a statutory obligation on the part of the Department of Education, and indeed on all of us as agents of the state, to ensure that that is the case. And so in looking at the revised budget, really defining for families what it would mean quite specifically in terms of delivery of the program is going to be the next step that gets taken. But I think that they are saying, the state, quite openly, that the ideal in terms of a time frame would be to go to the end of the year. And I think they genuinely like that to happen. And that's why they're indicating this payment structure and what would need to happen with it. And so the question is only when the budget is worked out, to be able to actually pull your families together, explain to them what that is, that's a process in terms of those adjustments that should probably be done in full cooperation with school leadership, with Beth, and probably with the full faculty. And have that discussion and reach agreement on that, and then present it to the parents, and then the parents fully informed to buy in for the remainder of the year. And if that doesn't work, then you work with the department on an earlier closure. Mm-hmm. But I think that I don't question actually that they have in writing indicated they actually think that it would be a good thing for this to go to the end of the year if possible, and that the language in there about it reaching mutual agreement is that as educators, to have the educators talking to each other and make sure that those statutory requirements are being met. That's what I think that's.
So then I would ask, on the heels of that, Tony, I would ask you and James what your professional interpretation of other factors. That's
well, I think that's just, I think it's straightforward language. Say there are all sorts of things, from delivery of the food service program to special education and services, to non-directly quantifiable areas where you might not have IEP services that are defined and need to be met, but you might have kids who are needing a certain level of support in order to be successful. And going to sort of what you were saying a minute ago, and particularly Jay said so eloquently, you know, if there are factors that might not go directly to a statutory regulation, but go to the experience of the children themselves on a daily basis. And so it's making an informed decision about whether the program that you can fund with the resources available will do that. And then if you then have commitments from families, I think that you are making an informed decision, then faculty can do the same, school leadership can do the same, and then you're doing what I think they're trying to say in language is, there are all these factors, they can't go into all of them, they can't wordsmith this document in the 9th hour fully, but they have to sort of say, obviously there are the statutory pieces, there are the financial pieces where the 110 enrollment and all those things are in there. And then separate from that, there are other factors that are about the quality of the experience on a daily basis for kids and the ability for professionals to provide it.
Okay, so boiling that down a little bit, aren't we faced this evening with the decision to send to Cliff and Jeff that we are going to agree to surrender the charter in order to get their support to go forward? Is that what I hear from this letter?
That's what I would say is absolutely on the table.
I think you're looking at it, Tony, with rose-colored glasses. They would love to have this school closed tonight. It would save them a fortune. They do not want this school open till June. They're making it so tough with this budget. And I'm not a financial person, but I'm not stupid either. This budget is not going to support this school till June, because there is no way that every single kid of the 115 is going to stay here.
So I think.
And I feel sad about it, but there's no way that's going to happen. And the second thing that's going to happen here is the staff itself. They're going to look out for themselves. They're human beings. They're not going to stay, all of them.
But I think that's why you're looking for, I think you're looking at a community-wide commitment, number one, in order for it to work, because it would be irresponsible if we really believe, without doing the homework, that we're just going to bleed students progressively throughout the spring, and that it becomes increasingly no longer viable. So I don't think anyone would support that, particularly the professionals in the building who work with these kids and watch over them every day. In terms of closing the school immediately, they have the ability to do that if they want. If that's what they really want, they can go to an emergency revocation and they can revoke the school. And you can go to a hearing and then try to go against it. They didn't even have to make this offer.
I just don't want to see this thing collapse in February.
All right. Look, it's going to be revoked, and there's no hope of appealing the revocation, right? We can't appeal that. Is that?
If we appeal, we are immediately financially cut off.
No, we can't appeal it.
Okay, so the only choices we have now are to accept this, is to close like immediately, or to accept this and then take our time in closing, whether it's 2 weeks, a month, 2 months, or the rest of the year. Is that correct?
I think I want to take a step back here, because I wish you guys had been at the parent meeting today. There were like 48 people in this room, and when we started, again, this just came off from the department, and I walked in that room and said, here are our choices. The people were very, very sad, first of all, that we didn't have the option of appeal. I mean, they were very realistic about it. We can't survive without that next check. And the bank is not going to give it to us. And the department's saying, we'll work with you if you work with us. But if you appeal, we're not working with you anymore. We're adversaries. That could have been more cut and dry there. The discussion came up about, well, should we just go now? And our whole point was, no, look, we made a commitment to the school. Just hang in there. We've got a great culture here. You can't duplicate it anywhere. And one of the parents said, well, I'm worried about the faculty and stuff. And one of the faculty members said, don't worry about us, we've made a commitment too. We are totally behind this place, we love what's going on here. I mean, it's a very, very strong response from the faculty, who were clearly willing to do whatever it takes to keep this place together as long as possible. And it was very interesting after that, because someone said, well, you know, so what does this mean? We have until, you know, June to relocate someplace into the system? And someone said, yeah, there's a deal being worked out hopefully right now with the, you know, the powers that be to make sure that this goes in an orderly fashion. Because I have to correct you, the state does not want to close us down right now. It's the last thing in the world they want. They don't want the public relation disaster, they don't want the money disaster. The city doesn't want either of those two items either. I mean, the orderly thing to do here is to hang on as long as possible. And the interesting point was when people started talking about, well, then we'll have time to go into the other school system. And someone said, but I chose this because I didn't want the other school system. Not going back, you know, and so there's like, you have a very devoted bunch of people who were just saying, you know, we want this.
I hear that, but if at some point it gets to be totally non-viable, then, and his predictions come true, we can close before June.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, look, there's like, we have to make an intelligent decision about how things are going. There's no question about that. And the whole thing is like right now, honestly, I don't like this. Who does? But it gets us some time. It lets us, makes everything orderly. And you know, we honestly, you know, we're going to lose some people anyway. But if we do not lose them to the fear, I think we have a very good shot of going a long way. And we will be a better place for this if we get everyone online for that. And that was one of the big purposes of this meeting today, was to say this is not a great looking outpost, but you're only going to make it worse by hitting the panic button here. And I think that there's been a lot of discussion among the parents of how to, you know, deal with this. And I think that, you know, we came to them tonight with what the real options are, and I think we'll be, you know, discussing them again. You know, how we move forward with the budget that we have and everything. But I think the important thing is that there is there's a very high level of enthusiasm for this environment still that is powerful. And I don't think we can underestimate it. I know for a fact that this came about because we all sat in the room and said, we want to keep this through June. How can we do this? We came back with fairly stern terms, but you know, this was part of the agreement. I'm sorry.
James, I think the issue though is that yes, the city wants the school to remain open through June because they don't want to have a flood of 120 kids or whatever we may be at this point flooding into the district schools. The state probably does not want that either because of what you described, the public relations issues, and you know, the state is there to support districts, and the district does not want this flood of additional kids into a system that's set up for a certain number already. So that being the case, I think that we all have a very common interest actually, because all of us on this board would like to see this school maintain and do right by the kids and by our staff through the end of June. The issue is whether we are going to have the funding to make that happen. And if we all have a common interest, including the state that has the authority and power to deal with this financially, I think we should be pressing to make sure that we receive the necessary funding to support our budget through the end of the year so that we can have an orderly transition. Otherwise, it's not going to be orderly. We can have all the commitments we want from parents tomorrow online, but I'm sorry, when a few people start to go and then a few more people start to go and we go through the scenario that Ira just described, people start to change their minds and they do the right thing for their kids, not for what they signed on December 18th on some petition. And I'm among those parents. People do what's right for their kids. So we as a board, I think, need to press for insured financing to make sure that this is an orderly transition. If the state is truly interested in that, if the city is truly interested in that, then we need to get on track together to make that happen.
But this does
And
not
not pretend that this agreement is going to do that for us. This is an agreement that is based entirely on enrollment. And as long as it's based entirely on enrollment, we have a school that is about to be revoked. We're going to have people leaving this school. I guarantee you.
Yeah.
we may have had 50 people there who were enthusiastic about our program, but there's another 60 or 70 families out there that were not in this meeting today, that didn't hear the message, and we're never going to have all those people in one room to face each other and make an agreement on this. So I'm not in favor of taking to the barricades and, running up San Juan Hill and appealing this and so forth. We are faced with shutting down our school. The question is, how are we going to do it? And I think it's in everybody's interest to do this in an orderly way, and we need some backing to make sure that happens. We can't do that by ourselves.
And how do we have that happen? Is it possible? Do we have any leverage to have that happen? Because this doesn't give us any leverage. I mean, if we accept this or reject it,
What we
It
get-
says at any time, this doesn't become viable.
Byron, again, they have that ability at any time to revoke, and they could.
I know, James, but what I mean is that, we're on the hook, no matter what. Hey, I don't like this, and I'm not in favor of this, but, I'm looking out for these kids. I don't want to see them walk out of here March 1st. They'll have nowhere to go.
But that's what Dave is saying.
Yeah.
We need some assurance, but how do we do that,
Right.
Dave? That's
Yeah.
the question.
James, what do you think?
Can we meet with them and bargain with them?
They're clearly telling us that we have to make a decision. I think from what I understand, is that, there's a whole, that we get the money that comes from enrollment. I mean, it's our job to be sustainable, not someone else's to make it sustainable, okay?
Well, let me ask you a
We
question.
don't control that.
Dave, you know the town fairly well, and you know the state, the way it functions pretty well. And I guess the question I would have is that, given the position we're in terms of this bargain, which I don't see a lot of room in here for, if you don't have any cards, I don't know how you play at the table. And so the question I would have is that basically what you just put out there is a challenge to the state and the city. Are they going to put these children first, perhaps for the first time in 2.5 years, by doing what this says, which is that to have an orderly transition is something we all believe in. We want to work together. We want to work collaboratively, and the education needs to be viable. You just very eloquently indicated that this doesn't do that because it ties it to enrollment, and it almost says, you're going to lose kids, so it's not going to be that way. So basically, you have to, I don't see it changing the decision of whether you vote to voluntarily hand it back in, but you put it into their court very clearly. Do you actually believe, what you're saying? Are you going to put these children first, who have paid a pretty high price, and their families, for, to my mind, some major political maneuvering? And are you going to are you going to genuinely come to the table and work with us, and to make sure the school stays open? And it's over to you. You've got the authority, you've got all the power. The amount of money it would take to actually fully keep the entire staff on board and support these kids through the end of the year is nothing in terms of a state budget.
So a way to do that, what I might suggest here is that, given our circumstances, and given the need to secure our financing through the end of the month, that we agree to surrender the charter, but with the additional statement that we want to continue some discussion about how to make this an orderly transition and to ensure the financing that will make that possible.
Irregardless of the population of the school. It's
Exactly.
the only way.
Exactly.
So if it goes down to 70 and, this pressure of from the outside of some of these yahoos telling the kids to leave, it doesn't affect the rest of the kids and the staff in this school. That's my only, otherwise, I don't buy it. I'd like to see the population thing eliminated.
So I do think there's some more room for discussion on this. I think we have a deadline tomorrow, and I think we're my sense of the discussion so far is that we're not so much about, making our case and, making a big protest out of this, but we want to do this in a reasonable way.
Yeah.
We're willing to surrender the charter, but we also have major concerns about the impact on our students and the impact on our city schools of the possible flood of additional kids into the schools this year.
So I just reread, any changes to these or other factors could quickly threaten the viability of the schools.
Absolutely.
Going concern.
Yep.
But again, they always have that ability to cite that, and that's not.
Yeah, but
That's not tomorrow morning.
It could be, but no, that could be the day after tomorrow morning.
Yep.
I mean, it doesn't matter whether we, if this whole very hard bargain was not in front of us right now, they'd still have the ability to do all this stuff.
Mhm.
They're just stating what their rights are. I mean, it's just like they've got nothing more from this document, except that if we want to get our money, we have to talk to them tonight. I mean, it's about basic.
Yeah.
Like Dave, I want to explore this thing that Dave's offering, because I think it's got a, so the question is, how do you, write back Cliff and say, okay, we will, in exchange for the financial piece, that's run of the charter, but we want to ensure that we have a viable school as long as, through June, because we've all said that's a priority. And where do we put the teeth in there? How's that going to happen?
For the welfare of the kids.
Right? Well, that unfortunately there's a little subjectivity there, because they can also argue the welfare of the kids is to get them into an environment.
Well, James, we could vote at any time as a board that we're closing a school. We could vote in January that we're going to close the school, or whatever month it might be. The idea here is to leave the door open for further negotiation to make sure that this transition happens in an orderly way.
So what do we add that exact
It's
language
in
to?
everybody's interest, as everybody seems to be saying, everybody I've talked to and heard from, and that's quite an array of people at this point. Everybody is committed to trying to keep the school open through June. We cannot do that as a board by ourselves. And we are not, frankly, responsible for some of the recent developments that have cut the knees out from under us in terms financially and otherwise. So at this point, we're not just on our own about this. We need some help.
So how do we express that in a reply?
Well, I think out of Hargraves and Fink book, which they have in the state house, Malden, sustained dialogue would be two words that I would think of that wouldn't be an amendment to, okay, we surrender the charter, and respectfully request sustained dialogue to make sure that the program remains viable. And
well, I think my only concern would be that I think that if they are indicating they're going to collaborate in good faith, that's basically all you've got. You don't have poker chips that you can play. So they are really going to stand up and recognize these kids as important. The families are all quite willing to sign, indicating that they want to stay, and that this is the choice for at least the vast majority of them. And is the department genuinely in the city going to work collaboratively with the school to make sure that happens? And if they don't do that, then shame on them. But I don't think we have a mechanism to, based on the language in here, to not reach some decision this evening and communicate that to the department and the CSO prior to the meeting tomorrow. Because it's going to decide whether they take it off as an agenda item or not, and whether they, because the language is pretty clear here. It indicates that, that we will, in terms of the terms listed above, essentially if the GCACS board of trustees votes to surrender its charter, forfeiting its right to an administrative appeal prior to the scheduled revocation vote at the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education. Very clear. You know, it's not, you know, I think that as a first step, you have to go there. And in some ways, you know, you're putting it in their court very publicly. You know, are you going to put these children first? Are you going to genuinely do what you say you're interested in doing? And then we really need you to step up and help make sure that happens.
So it seems to me that one of the things that I'm agreeing that we agree to hand back the charter. It doesn't seem to be a choice. It seems like what we want to say, following on Dave, is that we're very concerned about an orderly, good spring for these children and these teachers and these families. The city of Gloucester and its school system would be radically impacted by a quick dissolution of the school. We will bring in Mayor Kirk and other parties to help us think about transitions, but we would like to count on the state's support through the spring, which means something like, I mean, we can't demand that they keep us at 110 level of support, but we can say something like that level will have to be there for us to have an orderly transition. Or we might be thinking, in consultation again with Mayor Kirk and the Gloucester superintendent, we might have to think about shutting the school down quickly in January or February. In other words, that I don't mean to put that as a threat. I'm just saying if the alternatives aren't good, they should know that we might be looking at that option.
I think that's a good point, because we can certainly do, we can say, look, you know, we're as actively involved in this decision to keep or not keep the school as you guys are, and because we're more on top of it, you know, we see more clearly. But I think the thing is to emphasize that we, you know, after this, we want to get back to you and we want to, as a, you know, pursue our options to make this school viable through June if possible, but then to make sure that it is a bilateral decision, because it is the children whose, you know,
Futures are but they must also understand, I think, that that forcing our hand to give back the charter is an invitation for some families to leave the school. That will just inevitably happen. So that they're putting us in this position, and they should know that we would much rather have a soft, good landing for everybody involved in this wonderful and now, I think, ill-fated enterprise. But that the good landing can't happen if the state nickels and dimes us with each departing student, who happens in some cases to be leaving because the state forced us to give back the charter. That's like, you know, you know, I don't know what, I don't have a metaphor, but it's awful, would be. Anyway, I have some confidence in you, James. I think it seems like this, well, you've been through some wrenching stuff on all this, but it seems like if they're interested in not in the interests of the children, and if they are interested also in not having a public relations fiasco, and if they're interested in what the Gloucester wider community, how it will impact the wider Gloucester community, I think we do have a little bit of leverage, and I do think the mayor might be a useful.
Oh, I agree with you there. I think one of the points that has always been kind of understood is that the city, probably even more than the state, wants this to work through June. And I think if we can somehow pull the mayor in to advocate in a meeting, for example, and figure out what our best options are to keep things through June, or to have some kind of benchmarking to decide what's going to happen, should it not be possible. I would rather focus on the resources we need to get there,
Amen.
because I think if you'd seen the commitment from the teachers and from the people, this room tonight, there's definitely a need for this. There's a demand for it, and there's a very motivated bunch of parents that are going to hang in there thick and thin, and have already proven so over the last few years. So I totally, I don't want to put any families or children through an unnecessarily, weakened school, but I also are asking the parents for commitment to this, and we need to ask the city, for commitment too.
Have you met with the superintendent at all? Has he?
He's met, I believe they've had some meetings already to discuss, what would happen. And my impression, my understanding is that they do not want this flood back because it requires
Well,
restaffing.
if they were to communicate that to the
I
CSO,
think they have.
as
I think there's already been a meeting to that extent. I believe I understand.
well, that's a lever. That's
Well, I
leverage.
think
We have that leverage too.
Well, but I agree with that, and we're seeing that, because this whole thing about going to the end of the year is good. I mean, 2 weeks ago, because they hadn't seen any more numbers, they were saying, we can, if you're financially insolvent, we can close you.
But I mean, they don't want to close this March 1st. If we fall below 100, they don't want to do that.
Well,
If they've met with the superintendent and said, we can't handle that
it'd be
kind of
much
flow.
better. It'd be much better if this is not going to work, then it's better that it happens in the fall. For the relocation of the kids. I mean, that's a given.
Oh,
So-
that's our leverage.
Well, and that's why we're where we are.
But we're still.
We have some, not much, apparently, but some.
Yeah, but James, we're not there because they still have the button that they can press February 1st, March
I
1st.
agree, they've always had that button.
No, I know they always
And
have, but
They're
they have,
struggling this year.
they have the button now. And,
I don't know.
and we can take the button away with the leverage of the superintendent and the mayor saying that they would rather have the transition next September.
I honestly, I think we've gotten this far because of the leverage. They've always said, we're going to do what's right for the kids, what's right for the families. And I think we've been able to say, well, what's right for the kids is maybe keeping them where they are and not moving them someplace else. I think that's been the positive side of leverage. Because you can take that, do what's right for the kids, and cut it either way. Maybe what's right for the kids is relocate them. I think what's happened here is, when you look at the whole picture, what's right for the kids is to stay here for the rest of the year. And I think that's where we are seeing some leverage, and we do have some. That's our only place we have it right now. We don't have it financially, unfortunately, we don't have it enrollment-wise. We have to focus on, I think, showing that we're working with the state to get the results that everyone wants. And I think those results are the kids through the end of the year. So we have financial flow through the end of the year. So we have a chance to, I agree, we've got to work out some other collaborations here besides the one we have. Unfortunately, this has really put us up against the wall in terms of having to make a decision without having the benefit of what other collaborations can we explore.
Can we email him back and say that we would like to delay this decision?
No, he's clearly said it's got to be. There are some things he's clearly said about money, about timeframes. This whole idea of the whole surrender volunteer, came up at the very first meeting.
Yeah.
So this is one of the things you can do, and he said you got to do it before the meeting. I was thinking that it's not going to happen, but here we are. So, but that's always been. They're very clear about we're working with them right now, not us working.
Well, I'm going to steadfast on what I feel. I feel it's dangerous for the kids to accept this and then move on and have this fall apart before.
You don't think it's dangerous to have them have to leave in 2 weeks?
Yes, I think.
I mean, that's a much worse option in my
Well,
opinion.
It's not either or, I don't think. I think it's, we can't just kick the kids out in 2 weeks around Christmas
No,
with all
it's too much
this. We need
going on.
an orderly closure, and whether that's in 2 months or 3 months, or whatever it is, we have to have a plan. And this is the only option we have,
Right.
besides closing our doors right now in the Christmas season and with all this trauma and everything. I just don't think it's healthy for the kids. I do believe that we don't want to bleed to death, but give us some months to do it, or the whole year.
We're gonna have a conversation. You know.
That's the way I see it.
Well,
So were you in a position for somebody to make a motion about it?
I think what we might want to do is figure out what the response is going to be and write the motion, and then, I mean, is that too much, or do we want to say that we can trust Dave?
Or Dave's crafting up.
I'm writing on it. Any other comments, Aaron?
Your hands are tied.
Yeah.
There's not much of a choice.
Eric, before making some language here.
What's the best thing that can be done to help the kids through the year?
If we don't, yeah, I mean, this is, like, if we don't give this a shot, you know, we'll, I just don't see folding the tent as a responsible or realistic option.
So,
What do you got?
let me read what I wrote here, and Eric's had a suggestion here as well, but perhaps we can work on this to craft a...
can you speak a little louder, Dave?
Perhaps we can work on this to craft a statement. I just put together some ideas. It's a very rough draft, and Eric has suggested some wording as well. So, given the current circumstances, the GCA Board of Trustees hereby agrees to surrender the charter of Gloucester Community Arts Charter School, effective whenever that would be. However, we request continued discussion with the Department of Education, Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, to ensure the continued viability of the schools to the end of the academic year. It appears that all parties, including state and city, the state and city, parents and staff have a common interest in keeping the school open through June 2012. And
13.
I would add the board there.
2013.
Thank you. Yep. Under the current financial circumstances, we cannot ensure that without a commitment that the state will maintain the funding necessary to make that happen. We hereby request further discussion to create an agreement that will make for an orderly transition. That's what I ended.
Can I just say one more thing? If the state sticks to the 110 or whatever the student population is, I think we have to have a plan for when the numbers get to a certain point, we're going to have an orderly closing. I think that needs to...
You know what, I don't want to go there right now. I really don't, because I agree with what you're saying. We got to keep an eye out for that, definitely. But you never know what might happen. It may be that, you know, some of the overhead goes away because we lose a certain kind of student or, you know, a certain group, or we can reorganize. So I would really rather not tie us into some pure mathematical formula when the whole way this is managed is anything but math. It's not just like 18 kids in the classroom. You know, it's like you organize them by, like the whole discussion is 6, 7, 8 right now. Yes, you could have 3 teachers for 3 grades, or you could have 2 teachers for 2 different subject matters.
No.
I'm not totally saying that's the way to go, but I don't like the idea of hooking us into a numerical formula,
No,
at which point we cross a red line in the day. I think that's really cutting our options off, frankly.
Okay, then what's going to prevent us from being in this position in 1 month or 2 months where the population is down and we have teachers leaving and then when do we draw the line? How do we make a decision?
Well, this is something we need to talk to the teachers about, we need to talk to the families about. And we say, you know, where are we, you know, when do we know? And this is something that will obviously have a huge impact. When will we know, or where will we be when we know, and how will we know that this isn't working?
And how are we going to
we can't answer that right now. It's a full community conversation. It's not a personal side. I appreciate the fact that we need to have that, and that was part of the discussion tonight with the parent. This board is a very, very ongoing discussion about how it's going, you know, under these circumstances.
So I'm going to make a recommendation that we use Dave's words or something like that, a combination of Tony and Eric and Dave's words, and see what the outcome, what the response is to that.
Yeah, I gotta say right now, I know for a fact that they will look at to provide financial support as a conditional killer. I'd say to explore state resources for financial support. Because they've already said in no uncertain terms that they're not gonna write anymore. They're not giving money out of their own pockets of the department. Now, the department may know people in other places.
Well, I mean, number one, I think in terms of the wording, it needs to be tied to this document.
Yeah.
So we want to say
Sure.
clearly that it's based actually on a request initially by the department. It was the department that said to us that we would like to not go to a hearing, not have a prolonged process in this, and reach agreement that you would surrender the charter and that we work together on collaboratively to see the school through to the end of the year, as long as, and we would share this, I mean, in all honesty, which is what we've been talking about wrestling with, that it is a viable program for the children for the remainder of the year, in terms of, you even say that language. And that we want to continue to work with you to make sure that is possible.
But what does viable mean?
Well, that's where, I mean, the one thing I would correct, I do have in here where he uses the word, which is theirs, that with an enrollment of 110 and significant cuts to the staff, and then mentions the $200,000 payment. And you know, when you throw in words like significant in the same way that down below you put in other factors, you know, you're influencing the way the document is seen. That, you know, essentially with an enrollment of 110 and some cuts, we feel we have a budget that is viable and that would support the program. However, you know, and you can go on and say, however, as you have alluded to in the document, that the minute you declare a school, even potentially may be revoked, it can hit enrollment. And that we want to work with the department collaboratively to define the best way to ensure a orderly transition with time for families to think, for children to adjust, and to have the financial support necessary to do that well. And hopefully we all share in that, something to that effect. You know, but I would tie it, just going back to the initial points, I tied to this document. I made it clear that this was actually a suggestion of the department, you know, with the caveat in there, you know, obviously that if we don't do that, you know, that we're headed in a different direction that won't be collaborative. You know, so that, you know, at your suggestion, you know, or whatever language you put in there, but tie it to this, I would correct and put in some, you know, 110 some cuts, that we feel we have a program that is viable. Because obviously we've suggested it as a budget to them, and indicated that we feel that's the case. And then the issue is in terms of, you know, we would like to work collaboratively to explore financial options and funding to ensure that this is the case, given that we are all committed to this happening.
I think it's very realistic that we're going to go below 110 relatively quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, Susan, you raise a really good issue that, you know, it's easy for us as board members to say, we'll cut back here, we'll cut back there, and we'll do whatever's necessary to keep it open. But the reality for the staff is 6 months of total uncertainty about whether they're going to be employed month to month, which is really unfair to them. The other piece that I've heard directly from staff is concern that if their positions are cut in half, they go half-time, that the unemployment that results from that, if they're eventually laid off, will be based on their half-time payment. That's not fair to them either, because that's certainly not any fault of theirs. So I think we need to be really judicious about how we're making cuts and doing it in the best interests of the people that we are representing here.
So,
And it's not just a financial decision. I don't think anybody else here thinks that it is, but take that into account. I also think it would be useful and very helpful to hear from Beth about what your thoughts are on our current situation.
I'm very concerned.
before we recognize Beth.
Some cuts is very different than what I think the cuts will be. And I don't have the answer tonight, but I think it will be very difficult. I wonder if, I know you don't want to hear this, but is it enough of a viable program? That's what I'm thinking. And I do worry about everything that you just brought up, Dave. Yeah. It's a different feeling when I would like it to be graceful, but it's the end of the year. You know, I mean, it's not the beginning of looking at the school as potential. I think we really do need to think about what's best for these kids, and it's without and what's best for teachers too. They have to be able to breathe while they teach so that they can think. And already we all know how hard often charter school teachers work in terms of less prep than other teachers. And we're looking at cuts that will probably affect just that, as well as how do you function a school without any assistance or little assistance to the administration, who you want to be looking at teaching and learning, not managing, to have a graceful year. These are all things, but at this point, we've met about what that looks like in terms of figures, but that would have to get relooked at to make sure that I have a full picture before starting that conversation.
Well, doesn't that, to ask you a question, I mean, it sounds like even what they've said, we're not in disagreement on it. I mean, isn't there a shared commitment on the part of every board member, every professional teacher, and all those, even on the Board of Education, that, you know, we're about kids. It's not just that we have a statutory obligation, we need to get into the profession to do harm to children. You know, so that in the end, what they've put there, that we have to be able to work together to mutually agree that this is a viable program. If we can't do that,
well, if they want to engage in that, that's a great thing. But if they don't, then we have our financial responsibility to make cuts to meet that 110, if I understand it correctly. Mm-hmm. And that's what we need to put on the table. Mm-hmm. And the conversation of that is the answer. Is that viable or not viable?
Correct.
So right now, what we can do is perhaps maybe agree that we will hand back the charter and that we will have the conversation with the state, but that won't settle the question of when we close the school. Correct. That we actually then need
to work
both a conversation with the state about what kind of support they're going to give, and a conversation with ourselves about what's a realistic option for the spring. And we may end up deciding we can do the spring, or we may end up thinking that for powerful reasons, we should close the school sooner rather than later. But that the conversation that we haven't had is the conversation that we just started now with Beth and with the teachers and with the parents about, you know, and also the budget, what the budget actually looks like. You know.
But can we pay the teachers while we have that conversation? Do we have enough money to pay the teachers to make that decision?
Well, signing this will give us some.
Well, I believe that our payroll is good through the end of December.
Okay.
So we have, that's why Cindy Marie's offered to come up and talk to all of us about, you know, what she sees, what the other practices are at other charter schools, you know, where the, that is. But I think it's not her conversation, obviously, but it's, you know, she does have some experience in this. We'd also need to know from her if there's
Case manager,
yeah,
I actually think that Beth's raised a really important
Okay,
question,
sorry.
and I think it needs to be asked directly to the department.
yeah,
The teachers are actually paid 2 weeks in arrears.
right.
So they've just received their December 15th payment.
Okay,
And for work they've already done,
yeah,
they're already in uncharted territory, and out of the goodness of their hearts and their professional commitment, coming in every day and working, not knowing at this point if they're going to get a paycheck on December 30th. And I think that we need to go directly to the department tomorrow, and we need to seek an answer to that. Because these professionals are working every day, and there needs to be some indication from the department immediately in terms of the $200,000 December 30th payment that guarantees that those teachers will be paid. And I think that needs to be pursued directly with them. It's not a Cindy Marie question.
okay.
This is a question directly to the
Okay.
department and the
Well,
state.
this idea is that you indicate that in order for GCACS to maintain its core academic program to remain financially viable, the school estimates it needs a December 31st, 2012 payment of $200,000 with monthly payments for the remainder of the year.
But this is all conditional. This is all conditional on mutually agreeing that the program can continue on. They're needing to actually indicate that the December 30th payment will come through. The back payment at least is guaranteed so that the teachers and students have stability for the remainder of the month. I think it's a very straightforward question, and the answer is either yes or no. And I think we should ask it first thing tomorrow morning.
Why don't you just ask
My-
him
my-
tonight in response? Why don't you just ask him tonight in response here?
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, no, I don't want to wait. If we're helping them, you know, by not being on the agenda,
Yeah, that's
let's
great.
accommodate that. Let's, you know, get this back right away. But, you know, we need to know that.
I don't know if Cliff's got the authority to make that level of decision, so, you know, we may not be able to reach the person who can. But I think that, all I'm saying is that whether you can do it tonight, great. If not, I think it has to be a first priority tomorrow and needs to be answered directly. Because it goes to stability and support.
Also,
Because the chair recognizes that.
oh, yes, I'm sorry, the chair.
I just wanted to ask a follow-up question, and that is, I know that the faculty would welcome a conversation around the possibilities of finding a solution. But again, we're headed into 2 weeks off, and it's their vacation. So I don't know when we're going to have that conversation. So that's another component of the December 30th. You get paid for what's due you, and then I don't have a crystal ball, but then how do we then move forward early when we return in January to have that conversation? Because we're running out of time this week.
Correct.
Well, we should have a answer to this question about paychecks
Too soon?
tomorrow, I don't
Okay.
know. So, you know, perhaps Wednesday afternoon would be a time to meet with
Well,
staff and,
Yeah.
you know, answer that question. They're gonna have other questions about this meeting, no doubt, whatever comes out of tomorrow. So maybe that's the time to sit down and talk, at least initially. And there'll be others later on. Beth, just to get a better picture, have you had particular questions from staff about their concerns regarding the next 6 months? You know, in terms of anything from unemployment to, you know.
They're very worried about all that. And I would say that,
So what sort of things are
well,
they
I
worried
think
about?
their gracefulness so far has been pretty outstanding. They've been really waiting this out, but I think that they are similar. I would see a similar response, as you were mentioning, that we have a lot of commitment from parents as well. They love the school. But when it gets a little bit tougher, when it's no longer the same school, they need to really, their first priority, of course, is their children. And what they thought was good might not be the solution down the road. And I believe the same will be true for teachers. Right now, they've still been together as a faculty, and there hasn't been, we've been building, we haven't been breaking down. And when we take the turn to break down, it just becomes different. And I think that I would really ask you to think about being in their shoes of not knowing what each week will look like for them. And there's not a lot of fat here. We support each other and pick up for each other. And so when there's going to be fewer of us doing that, it's going to impact everybody. So even if you're not cut, you will be affected. This is going to be a whole school effect.
So the students who have some risk factors in their lives anyway will begin to see the insecurity, and they may not know what to do with that.
That's true too. So, you know, that's another piece. I know I've been talking about this a lot, but I really think that we need to think about how many transitions we ask of children. And I know that they love this place, but it's something we need to look at.
So what's our next step as a board?
It seems like we need to make
We
it.
gotta make a motion.
No, we gotta come up with a statement first and then vote on it.
Yeah, and, you know, I think the second step is answering this question about pay for staff. But that would be a question tomorrow morning probably, or tonight.
Well, then figuring out some specifics about for the staff.
The key here is that in this condition, if the GCACS Board of Trustees votes to surrender its charter, forfeiting its right to an administrative appeal prior to the scheduled revocation at the Board of Elementary, December 18th meeting, the department can work cooperatively with the school to arrange for payments to be made in a manner consistent with that described above. That's $200,000 on the 31st of December, which is...
James, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, okay. So what they're saying is that if the Board of Trustees votes to surrender its charter, forfeit its right to an appeal, the department can work cooperatively with the school to arrange for payments to be made in a manner consistent with that described above. Okay, that's our December 31st, 2012 payment of $200,000, and then the monthly payments after that we want. Okay, the thing is that if we can mutually determine the continuation of the school for the remainder of the year is in the best interest of the children and families of the school. I think we have to kind of insinuate ourselves in here and say we want to begin immediately in the determination of understanding whether or not the continuation of the school for the remainder of the year is in the best interest. Because we know that the city is in favor of that. We know that the district is in favor of that. And we need to find out, that...
Can we mention that in that?
No, I'm saying, put it right back and say, we want this meeting. This is what everyone needs to be mentioning.
Oh, I see.
We want a meeting as soon as possible to discuss what our criteria. We need to take control back over the
But
question of
accept
what is
this
viable.
agreement now.
Huh?
Accept this tonight.
Yeah, no, we're not, I don't put pressure on like that. I'm just saying, we agree to this with the understanding that we need to meet as
Yeah.
soon as possible. Because we need to clarify this, so there's no...
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Yep, I'm for that.
Okay. Okay. Okay, this is very good. This is a whereas, now, therefore, class. Thank you very much. It's good. How would we, well, this would be our motion. Then we would then vote.
Can I just make copies of that so we can all...
Yeah, sure. Tony, go ahead. I guess my question is, how do we put in the additional language about, I guess that could just be part of the cover letter or something that we need to discuss. You know, we want to meet as soon as possible to discuss. See what I'm saying, that, Dave?
Yeah, I
Because this is where we explore the resources.
Exactly, I think Eric's worded it in legalese to the point of surrendering the
You
charter.
could put in another whereas clause,
Okay.
whereas the board believes it is critical that we meet immediately to discuss certain financial issues.
Okay, yeah, let's put that in. Right. Because I do want to make sure that if in this, we can mutually determine the continuation of the school. I want to make sure we have a very strong place at the table when it comes down to mutual determinations. Send them, we have a resolution from the board that we vote on. And just send it off as a resolution, and that's it. He said just email him, or he said email him.
Yeah, he's gonna check an email.
I don't think he's gonna be at work right now for some reason, it's like 8 o'clock, so. I don't have his cell phone, that's his work number. Is he-
Yeah, if we could write it, yeah.
I don't know, just wait, I don't know, just email it now and just wait and make sure that he doesn't come back with anything. Well, I mean, it's still acceptance, I'm not making this conditional. That's my one concern, I don't want this, saying, we've been down the road of getting money from the state. It's just, it's not for problem education, for the record now, they may help us explore other places, because there are other resources.
Yeah, and the other is the range of kids that need a community. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Some important terms to consider. Okay, we're going to put one more. Yeah, let's just read through. I think we've got one more whereas clause we want to put in. Okay. Let me just read this as it is, and then we can discuss how we want to put in the language about meeting as soon as possible. And Eric, I'd ask you if any help on that would be greatly appreciated. So you got it, okay. So whereas the Department of Education has requested the board withdraw its charter by December 18, 2012, whereas the department has indicated in writing that it will attempt to keep the school open through June 30, 2012, provided it is in the best interest of children, whereas the school believes that the children in the school and the Gloucester School District would be harmed by an abrupt closing. Now, therefore, the board hereby unconditionally agrees to withdraw its charter. And would there be any other language about this? Again, my concern is this whole area of mutual determination and continuation of the school. How do we maintain that? Or do we? No? Okay.
There's no leverage.
There's no leverage, okay. Okay, so the board will recognize Eric. Yeah, Tony?
Just the you want to change the term to voluntarily agrees to surrender its charter. And the only thing I'm not sure about is whether it's volunteered to surrender its charter as of June 30th, because you actually still have to be chartered as an entity in order to continue out the year. So I think at this point it should be voluntary agrees to surrender the charter on June 30, 2000, because you have to also meet your obligations for the end of the fiscal year.
Except, Tony, I think based on what I read, it was saying that they want the voluntary surrender to be this evening as a condition of that surrender. We get.
Well, we're surrendering it, but but we're indicating as of June 30th, because I think you have to be, otherwise you're not a state entity.
Exactly.
If you surrender your charter, you're no longer chartered by you have no authority.
Just
Unless you're
Unless they can
Effective.
set that up.
Maybe effective June?
I mean, you can make a call quickly and check with Cliff, but I
Jay
think
suggested the word effective June.
effective, yeah.
That would
Voluntary.
We surrender December 18th, effective June 30th. I mean, you know, that's what it is.
Right.
If they want to change it, they'll change it.
So are we withdrawing our, where's the Department of Education has requested the board withdraw its charter?
To surrender its charter.
Surrender, yeah.
Voluntarily surrender its
Voluntarily
charter.
agrees.
And you could say, yeah, to your point, on December 17th,
Effective June 30th.
June 30th.
Yeah, whatever.
2000.
I don't like the word surrender.
That's the term they use. But, yeah. And it does actually feel that way.
And I might say very politely, I'd like to say this politely. Mr. Del Vecchio, we don't need 48-hour, I mean, the children are so much more important in something like that. And I'd like to say politely, please, leave us alone for a while, will you? Thank you.
Okay, so the first section is whereas we should say the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. And Eric, would you mind writing this up? Walk us through it.
Yeah, I'll do a separate,
Would that be right?
So this is all we're gonna write back, I mean, once we have this finished, this is all we're gonna send back to Cliff.
Yeah, I think we can decide whether there's an additional vote or something. Yeah. But let's get this together.
Yeah, okay. So is everybody happy with the way this looks right now?
Yeah.
Because this is our drafting period, and then we go into a vote.
Let's walk through it
Okay.
right now. So
Okay.
whereas the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education
Yeah. Has requested. Oh, sorry.
Give me a second here.
I need some water.
Has requested that the board, what should we say, GCA board?
Yeah, GCA board, yeah, otherwise it can be.
GCACS is how they refer to it in the document.
Okay, we can use that GCACS board. Voluntarily surrender. The GCACS charter. On December 17th,
prior to,
or prior to December 18th.
Yeah.
2012.
And then I suggested effective June 30th,
Correct.
2013.
Well, we can say that at the end.
No.
Yeah, we can say it in both places. No damage done there.
I think you should put it-
the abbreviation is GCS.
GCACS.
Either way.
Dave, don't you think we should put it conditional or until June right up there? Because we say it the same two places, I think we should put that, the condition until June.
The word we'd come up with was effective June 30th.
Okay, effective June 30th, so right after December.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right there.
Okay, all right, I didn't hear you say
Yeah.
that.
We all set, Eric?
Yep.
I was going to suggest that from this point on, with what Lori got saying there, that it then goes on to use the exact language that he's referred to enter into an agreement with the department to work collaboratively to keep GCACS open through the end of the current year, if that is in the best interest of children and families currently.
For the next whereas.
Yeah, right.
So the next bullet here would be whereas shall we say DESE?
Yeah, the department
um,
has indicated,
has indicated in writing.
right,
And what was that, Tony?
Read me the first one you've got there now.
whereas the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education has requested that the Board of Gloucester Community Arts Charter School voluntarily surrender the GCASCS charter prior to December 18th, 2012.
Effective June 30th, 2013?
Is that what they said?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's what they
That's
said.
something more adding.
Okay.
Okay.
I think it's kind of superfluous. I mean, the charter is, or you can say through the end of the summer or whatever, but it's fine.
Yeah, okay.
It's the key date here is the surrender to force.
Right.
Whereas the department has indicated in writing a willingness to enter into an agreement. Is that what it says?
Well, it's not, see, I was trying to tie it into the first one because the first one is actually the condition under which we're entering into the agreement. So it's indicating that whereas the department has asked GCACS to voluntarily surrender the charter on before December 18th to enter into an agreement with the department to work collaboratively to keep GCAS open until the end of the current school year. So you're trying to, maybe you've got a way to do that. I don't know if you need two whereas conditions or not, but it's making sure that they're linked, because the first one is, we've only put part of it in there, the whereas they have asked us to voluntarily surrender the
Whereas in
charter.
connection with such request, they have indicated.
Yeah.
In writing, a willingness to enter into an agreement, is that what it says?
Yeah.
Well, that's us entering into an agreement with them, that's what it says.
I think it's,
So,
I don't think it's, they haven't agreed to do anything in writing. Has indicated in writing, a willingness to attempt to work collaboratively. I mean, it's just, yeah.
Not even attempt, I'd say to work collaboratively.
Yeah,
It's
to work collaboratively.
Forget the equivocating language, it's just like, we're gonna work collaboratively.
To work collaboratively,
To keep it open during the end of this current school year.
provided,
So it's if that, and the statement here, or so if that is in the best interests of children and families
okay.
currently attending the school.
In the best interest, or in the interest?
If that is in the best interests
Yeah,
of the children and families currently attending the school.
oh, okay. Whereas,
And what about Gloucester School District would be harmed by an abrupt closing? Can I include or exclude that?
the board believes
Yeah, whereas the board believes,
Or agrees with the mayor and other people?
So we don't know that for sure.
We don't know, we don't know that for sure.
yeah, let's just keep it straightforward. So whereas the board believes that the
Gloucester Public Schools would be harmed by any
GC
proposal.
Well, I think the paragraph we have is pretty good.
I would focus on this, the children in the school will be harmed by an abrupt closing.
okay.
I mean, the district is important, but it's really, we're talking about the kids that are
Correct.
here. It's basically meant to be
Well, the
here.
third paragraph
We're
says
not taking
both
care,
of
we're
those.
taking care of these
The
kids.
third paragraph that I have says, believes the children in the school
And then it says,
and the
that-
Gloucester School District would be harmed, which seems to put the emphasis the way you're saying, and the way we want.
I think it's about the charter school kids.
I think it's actually both, James, because I'd like to make the point that I think Gloucester District has an interest in.
I agree, I don't disagree with that at all.
Yeah.
I get that totally, but I
So
just,
should we say that separately?
yeah, you also said the district, the Gloucester School District has an interest in an orderly,
Whereas the board believes the GCACS children and families and the Gloucester School District would be harmed by an abrupt closing.
sounds fine. That's it.
And whereas the board believes a prompt meeting with the department about obtaining financial assurances would be beneficial.
You get that?
Do we want to say that?
That just sounds conditional. It's like about exploring, I would say about exploring resources, because obviously they can put us in touch with other departments, the states. I would be very careful about doing anything that couches this in any way. Well, that's not an agreement,
Right. It's on-
So we're going to close you down anyway.
So just leave
I would
that.
say the whole point was to have an immediate meeting to discuss what
Leave that
constitutes mutual agreements, I mean, that's where we want to have it, that's in the contract, I mean, that's not the contract, it says here, if we can mutually determine the continuation of the school through the remainder of the year is in the best interest, that's what we want to have an immediate meeting about, is we want to explore how do we mutually determine that the continuation of the school through the remainder of the year is in the best interest. And what resources are available to
surrender its charge.
So, I mean, that's what I would do. I would go to this, the issue of, we want to make sure that this mutual determination is mutual. So we want to meet as soon as possible to discuss how we mutually determine that the continuation of the school for the remainder of the year serves the best interest of the children and the families.
Well, we could just say another whereas, so
Whereas.
whereas the board hereby requests
Which is,
further discussion with the ESE about maintaining financial viability and ensuring a smooth transition.
well, I mean, if you're going to say the viability thing, why would it just be limited to financial? Why wouldn't you also say programming, whatever, viability? Because again, we want to be part of the discussion about whether we're viable or not.
Yeah. So
We don't want something which I know and say, well, this isn't working.
okay, so let's just say viability, the school's viability.
Program viability?
And we should have a say in that. I mean, because we're the ones who design, that's what the charter's all about.
Yeah.
We should definitely have a say in
That's
that.
fine, Eric, I think program viability and I believe it was a smooth transition, is that right?
And an orderly transition
Orderly transition.
for the students.
Yeah.
When you're done typing, Eric, could you
I'll
read us what you have?
Yeah.
terms of logistics of, we have to sign this here?
No, once we vote, it's a motion.
Yeah.
Motion you vote.
This is how he signed his,
Mhm.
right there, so, I mean, it's, he set the example for us to follow. He just put his name there, so.
I would do a sincerely here, I do a sincerely here.
Mhm.
So,
Okay. Whereas the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education has requested that the Board of Gloucester Community Arts Charter School voluntarily surrender the GCACS charter prior to December 18, 2012, effective June 30th, 2013. Whereas in connection with such request, the department has indicated in writing a willingness to work collaboratively to keep the school open through the end of the school year, that is in the best interest of the children and families currently attending the school. Whereas the board believes that the GCACS children and families at the Gloucester School District would be harmed by an abrupt closing. And whereas the board requests further discussion with the department about maintaining program viability and an orderly transition for students. Now therefore the board hereby unconditionally agrees to surrender its charter effective June 30th, 2013.
So I have one suggested revision. Third, whereas.
Yeah.
So whereas the board believes that it is in the best interest of GCACS students and those of the Gloucester Public School District for GCACS to remain open through the end of the academic year.
Do you want to take out an abrupt
But that's,
closing?
I mean, that's, but you just said that at the end of the second paragraph.
I think
It was-
stating harm, if we make some other decisions down the line, is not a good idea.
Say that again, Dave?
It'd be hard.
If we're stating in this agreement that we're going to harm kids by closing our school, that's not a good thing to put in this
No.
statement here.
Could be harmed.
Because we,
That's not the point. The
'Cause-
point is that we want
because
to
the
act in
facts
the best interest of our
Yes.
students and the students in the Gloucester Public Schools.
Well, then let's say that, just what you just said is perfect. So whereas the Board of Trustees,
Whereas the board believes that it
What was wrong with
is,
this?
no, sorry, huh?
What was wrong with
No,
this?
I was confused by what you thought. I think you thought you were going after the harm part, which I agree with totally. But I was saying, what I like is that, I mean, you're basically saying, I can't see the difference. I see in the second paragraph seems to be that everyone's gonna try to work collaboratively to keep the school together. And then the third paragraph seems to be about that the, board believes it's in the best interest of the children of the school and the district to prevent an abrupt closing.
Okay.
We don't have to get into the harm part. I agree with that totally. It's like, who we say?
Yeah.
okay, with that?
Under the court of anything you say will be used against you.
And it is.
so I've revised that to say, whereas the board believes that it is in the best interest of the GCACS children and families and the Gloucester School District
It says students, actually students, yeah. I'm sorry.
for the GCACS students,
Yes.
okay, and the Gloucester School District for the GCACS to stay open through the current school year.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah.
And that's the last of the list, right? Last of the whereas.
Now, the next is the request for a meeting.
Right, okay, that's right.
So,
So question, Eric, on the second whereas, where you have, whereas you've said the part up front about the department asking for the voluntary surrender of the charter. Then at the bottom, the next whereas says, whereas in connection with such request, the department has indicated in writing a willingness to work collaboratively to keep the GCAS open through the end of the school year that is in the best interest of the children and families currently attending school. Is it clear that because it just says whereas in connection with such request, that it is the voluntary surrendering of the charter?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's the only request. It's refers immediately to the sign of
Is it a request or a demand?
So I need to email this to somebody, because I don't have email yet.
Well, we have Wi-Fi here, don't we?
Yeah.
It should probably go on school letterhead.
You-
And then who signs it? The full board?
I don't see why everyone wouldn't sign it. Can we print one up, Tony, and have everyone sign on? It's a
Well, you can just certify that it was
voted at such a level. Okay.
unanimously approved.
We'll vote on the
Shut
motion.
up the vote.
Okay.
Yeah, I should read the motion into the
Yeah,
minutes.
we can put it into a motion. Yeah, okay, why don't we do that, yeah. Okay.
Was something this important, do we have to have a roll call vote? Given that we're talking about the future of the school.
I don't think there's any rule on that part that I know
Okay.
of, but,
Just checking.
we would note anybody who opposes the measure.
So you need to have a vote, James.
Okay, I'd like to propose a motion that the board vote on adopting the resolution that we've written tonight, which in essence voluntarily surrenders the charter. And the text will be reviewed. Do we need to review it one more time before we do this?
We just heard it.
Okay, so may I have a second to that motion?
Second.
All in favor? All right. Looks like the ayes have it.
Any opposed?
Any opposed? Any abstainers? Okay, that vote carries. Do we have a discussion on that? Excuse me a second.